indicate a green check mark to let us know that you can hear. Terrific. So I know Nick was wondering about, so maybe Nick will get some tech support. Lynn, if you want to type, if you're not able to, no, that's not going to help. If you're not able to find the green check, but you can hear me, please indicate that in the chat pod. Because I don't want us to continue on without having what we need. Okay, well, I can see, and I'm sure the tech support people can see as well, that we have a few members who do not yet have, are not able to hear. So hopefully by looking at our materials, you'll be able to participate initially, and then we'll get you back on with sound. The question of why are we here really begins with the idea that we have this incredible training together, but how much more wonderful is it to start out by making some connections in real time? And my question to you is going to be, I'm sorry, I'm doing multitasking, and so lost my train of thought. My question is for us to get a profile of our group. So I can see that you've already seen the poll. If you would fill in the poll and let me know whether you are, and there are multiple answers possible here, an ESL teacher, an ABE teacher, an ASE teacher, a high-set teacher. Melinda, I'm not sure if that volume comment is referencing me, but if, okay, sorry. You know, we've got the presenter side up, so I'm watching that chat. And then, oh, I get it. Okay, thank you, Veronica. Okay, so I see right now we have 5 ESL teachers and 2 ABE teachers, and it could be that you're teaching in multiple contexts, which is very much what we do in adult education. That's part of the rigor that we experience. Right now, I'm not seeing anyone indicating that we have a coordinator or a career pathways navigator advisor. Let me broadcast so you can see the results. We are the classic adult education setting because we are multi-level. Let's see what else we can find out about our profile. I'm going to ask you about your familiarity with different important elements of adult education, standards and mandates, and instructional options. So I'd like to find out from you whether you're very familiar with any of these items. And I've given you the acronym in case that's something with which you are more familiar. And I see that people are hitting that college and career readiness standards for adults. That's been out since 2014, and I think a lot of us have had the chance to build familiarity. I also see that an equal number are familiar with the English language proficiency standards for adults, which is very exciting to me because that's only recently come out. And I see that the majority of us are familiar with WIOA, the Workforce Innovation and Opportunity Act. And note that I did say very familiar as opposed to glancingly familiar, or I've seen it, because that is going to play a role in our discussions of rigor today and in our face-to-face on the 16th. Let me give you a view of what people have said. And this constitutes the classic opening warm-up activity while people are getting their bearings. There's no harm, no foul if you're not filling this in. One thing I'd like you to know is that when we do some interactive work in the chat pods and in the various other activities we're doing today, Winnie will be able to send us a record of what we've said. So any ideas that come out will be recorded. Now I'm going to bring another one out about, even though we have very different contexts and we're not all in ESL, we know that our classes are filled with English language learners. So I'd like to know whether you feel that your English language learners are very proficient or not at all proficient. There are multiple answers possible here. Let me know what your take is on the English language learners in your room. That's right, Milana, you just check. You don't have to press enter. So the majority of us right now, about half, are saying that our learners are somewhat proficient. And surveys are a wonderful way for us to be able to do a little needs assessment in a very quick, with a very quick routine. And we can do that with answer cards when learners are not verbal. We can do it with all kinds of wonderful tech devices. We can do it with Kahoot or with Plickers. There are all kinds of opportunities for this kind of quick assessment. So let's look at our objectives beyond getting a sense of a profile of our group. As I mentioned, we're going to be connecting in real time today. I also, by virtue of looking at the context that you've identified and knowing a little bit more about the English learners in your classes, we'll be able to think about the context and needs that you have in regard to rigor. We'll launch our exploration of rigorous instruction. And it is just an exploration at this point. We're going to really dive in when we get together and have a chance to do a lot more task-based instruction and active learning. And then, of course, we'll use this time to preview our agenda and materials for our work together. So that's where we're going. I'd like to ask you to take a moment and reflect on these 7 questions that I'm going to be presenting. Actually, let me just get rid of these guys so they don't hide them. It's very exciting. There's so little in life that I can clear this quickly, but this does allow me to do that. So if you would, as we go through these questions, I'd like you to just think whether you think this is true or false. I'm going to present these exact same questions to you at the end of our workshop on the 16th. So right now, all I'd like you to do is just focus on your thinking, your reflection. Let me actually start with the first question. That would be a good way to start. So the first question, true or false, statement, true or false, academic skills are important for career training. And you don't have to answer a question in the chat pod if you want to, you're welcome to, but what I'd like you to do right now is just reflect. My second statement that I'd like you to consider whether you believe it is true or false, WIOA requirements include rigorous instruction. The third statement, which you saw right as we were coming up, is more work plus homework equals rigor. The next one, providing instructional support, or what we call scaffolding, means a diminution of rigor. I really liked that very high-end academic language. But in other words, when we help learners, we're actually reducing the amount of rigor that we're providing. Do you believe that to be true or false? And this is especially for those of you that are in ESL, but also those of you that have English language learners in your academic classes in ABE, ASE, and HSE. Adult ELLs can meet challenging academic standards. Do you believe that increasing rigor means having high expectations of learners? Do you believe that rigor is not for everyone? And so with that, take a moment, and we're going to go now to our lecture portion. And every good lecture starts with some schema building. So I'd like you, below this image, you see the brainstorm with the many learners. I would like you to type in the goals that you know your learners have. And I see that Lynn has started and Milana has started and multiple attendees are now typing. So type away. And Jerry has said, get a better job, receive a high school diploma, learn English, feel intelligent. That's a really great creative one. Get a better job. We've got, if I was doing a poll, we'd have 2 on better job. Keep typing. Be informed citizen. Liz is talking about the post-secondary work, as is Brenda, with also a nod toward employment. Cece points to something that we will be talking about when we come face-to-face, which is that sometimes you look at your classroom and their immediate goal is learning English, and they're not necessarily looking at a career pathway or post-secondary education. And some of what's on us is to provide that opportunity to explore those options. And Liz's is interesting because it's the more employment opportunities, not just a job, but more opportunities for different types of employment. And vocational training, very important for our learners to get the skills they need to be successful in vocational training. So we've identified a lot of goals. As I was going through, I think Cece was the only one that mentioned help children. That's certainly, and maybe I see informed citizens, so there's some civic engagement mentioned. Lynn, I see, is typing, and as soon as Lynn answers, then we'll go to the next brainstorm. Yes, Lynn, I love that one. That's a great one. Changing stereotypes. And that is something that rigorous instruction really empowers our learners to do through the skills of, through the exposure to the language that allows them to demonstrate their critical thinking. Not that they don't have the critical thinking, but they may not have the language. So knowing these learners' goals, as you've identified, what would be the skills that they would need to meet those goals? So let's think for a minute about job opportunities, or being able to show that you're intelligent, or battling stereotypes. He says English is a really broad skill. Can you get a little more specific? What types of skills in English? Because that's actually, again, where the seeds of rigor come in. Milan is coming right up with a CCR, supporting opinions with evidence. Jerry's talking about control of language. And I'm still not sure who SCOE Room C is. Nick. Is it Nick? No, it's not Nick. Certainly English language proficiency, but in order for us to do a really great job of helping our learners meet their goals, we have to look at what aspects of English language proficiency they need to focus on. Time management skills, a great soft skill, which Milana has mentioned, as well as Liz. We're going to want to drill down, I love that expression, we're going to want to drill down into discovering the types of skills in the skill areas that learners need. For example, being able to negotiate complex text, to be able to engage in academic discourse. These are the kinds of things that we want to listen accurately to complex oral passages. Things of that nature are really going to be important for our learners, because just think about what happens in a workplace setting, in a school office where a mother or father are going to enroll their child. Think of the kinds of language that they encounter. So great work, everybody. We'll be able to send these lists to you. There you go, Jerry, the academic vocabulary. And there's academic language and there's academic vocabulary. And the academic language is more the framework of how we engage in discourse, or what the writing, academic writing looks like. The academic vocabulary is the vocabulary that goes across different content areas, words like define, words like data. Stuck on the D's, obviously. So I'm going to wait for Margot and Brenda to finish, and then we'll go on to look a little more closely at what we mean by rigor. Yes, Brenda, absolutely. The academic strategies that, the language strategies that help them learn more effectively or demonstrate their learning, and the language that helps them demonstrate their critical thinking. In fact, one of the top skills identified by the top 100 employers in the United States is problem solving related to critical thinking. Okay, and Margot's talking about, as opposed to top down, bottom up, we have to do both. We need intention and we need direct instruction. And if our learners haven't had that instruction previously, that's something that we can offer them. Great work, everyone. So let me take you to a couple of thoughts about, take you to thoughts? That's not very artistic. Let me share with you a couple of thoughts about the concepts behind rigor and struggle and success. Could you take a moment and in the chat pod, could you just indicate what the word rigor means to you? A single word or a short phrase? And you guys are so much more positive than my Wisconsin participants were. Nice, Cece. So that it's relevant but difficult at the same time. Difficult relevance. Relevant difficulty. And I think, Marianne, the way that you put the word requiring along with participation and effort is terrific, because there is that element of rigor. You're not going to work around it. So I think, based on what you're putting here, which is terrific, I think that you can see that in and of itself is going to create some element of struggle for our students. Yes, Mary, a lot of people have put the word strict in there. And I think that strong has a more affirmative affect when we're talking about it with our learners. But I think that strict comes in certainly in terms of the process that we're providing a process. But I think we're going to get to flexible, which will be great. Exactly, Lynn. This is a point that we're going to make with something that Carol Dweck talks about with growth mindset. Margot, that's exactly right. I mean, not that there's a right answer, but in my world, there's a right answer. And that's exactly what we're looking at. We're looking at the idea that if we persist in the struggle, we are going to fail. It's really likely that we're going to fail, but if we keep persisting, we're going to have learned so much from that failure that we are ultimately successful. Brilliantly put. So this is the definition of academic rigor coming out of the Glossary of Educational Reform. And Nick, Margot, that's very lovely that you've given it to Nick. Excellent. Good collaboration. But you can see that I've highlighted the terms that actually are right up in you already said these things, high standards, high expectations. The one thing you didn't mention was the support. And that is a very big part of academic rigor. We are going to support the learners in their process towards achieving success in a rigorous instructional setting. This kind of sums up the difference between some of the instruction that we've had prior to this and prior to this awareness and rigorous instruction. I'm going to just give you a minute to read it. So within Paul, I'm going to pronounce his name as I think it's probably pronounced, Paul Zeitz's quote, what we're seeing in here is a little bit of struggle because there could be struggle in the exercise if you don't know the technique. So of course, but once you have the technique, once you have a process, then it becomes pretty much a matter of applying that process. In a case where you have a problem and you really have to think deeply about all the threads that go into that problem, that demands a lot more higher level thinking. And that's what we're looking at, is providing problems, not as you're mentioning, Lynn, not that the problem is actually a good thing. So these are a few statements about the rationale for rigor and struggle, knowing that the 21st century work world is asking for high levels of content knowledge and skills, and in these three areas: technology, communication, and problem solving. So there are the English skills that you're talking about, but digital literacy, technology in complex environments. I know there's a PIAC expression. So if somebody remembers the PIAC expression, it's suddenly gone out of my 61-year-old brain. Please put it in the chat, and then you'll look so brilliant. And then, as I mentioned, the problem solving. Betsy Parrish, who some of you may know as the brilliant author and maven of all things adult ESL, worked on the Links ESL project, and you can see I've cited the issue brief that she did. But meeting the needs of today's adult English learners is an entire program that has both a module and an issue brief and a digital magazine. And those materials we will be sharing during the workshop. But this is what she's talking about in terms of the everyday aspects of rigor. And I apologize for the background noise. I'm not doing anything differently. So what could be happening, I'd like to say, is that I'm next to Cal State Northridge, and they are always messing with our internet. So maybe I'm getting some sort of interference that way. I pretty much stayed still as a statue. So these are the types of activities, tasks that go along with what we've thought about with life skills approach. But we know that with rigor, we're also looking at college and career readiness. And college and career readiness involves higher level content. But these tasks are, in fact, can be an element of higher level content. And yes, there you go, Brenda. I forget who put this in earlier, and I applauded you. So please consider yourself applauded again. This is Carol Dweck of Stanford, and she has been talking about something called the growth mindset, which includes these elements: a commitment to learning, aka persistence, and the learner taking informed risks and learning from the results, knowing that failures and successes alike yield results. Oh, I was just thinking, I wonder if it's my glasses. I will take my glasses off. Sorry if that made noise. Okay. Now, of course, I can't read anything, but I know this by heart. So this growth mindset concept is very important in contrast to a fixed mindset. Many adult learners come into our programs. It worked? Okay, that's what it was. Sorry. No, I had no bangles. I wear no bangles. The growth mindset is opposed to the fixed mindset. because it is telling the learner that failure is part of the process and they accept that. A fixed mindset says, if I get it wrong, that's it. There's no going back. I'm done. And there's a fixed amount of intelligence that I have. I've reached that amount and I'm done. Whereas a growth mindset says, my intelligence has no boundaries and I can continue to learn and grow. And we know from adult educators how important that is for an adult learner to have that mindset. These are some of the types of things we can hear our learners say. Winnie, would you do me a favor and take off all the green checks? I know I can do that, but I just, if you could take those off, then I can ask for them again. And here are some ways to change the language. If we put this type of altered language, mindset language swap, if we put that up on a board, on a tear sheet, learners can start to use this language more effectively and change their minds. The other thing we have to be aware of is how many convergent questions we ask, how many questions that have a right answer. We want to build awareness, we want to build knowledge, and in some cases we need that recall and demonstration of understanding. But we also want to make sure we include divergent questions, open-ended questions that allow the learners to express multiple ways of getting to the answer to a problem or a solution, because that in turn really does connect both to growth mindset and to rigor. So before you ask a question, here are a few things you could consider. Does the question draw out and work with students' prior knowledge? Does it raise the visibility of the key concepts the students are learning? Now, in those cases, they could be convergent responses, although if working with the student's prior knowledge, you might get different responses. And this is a little different than text-dependent questions. The first question, the first point, is not actually a text-dependent question necessarily unless you relate what the learner is experiencing directly to the text. So bear in mind that text-dependent questions are very important for dealing with text complexity, but this is also important in terms of helping a learner have a growth mindset. So we want to ask, will the question stimulate peer discussion? And last, and probably not least at all, should probably be at the very top, is it clear what the question is about? I always say that when I'm in the classroom, if I have an activity and the activity frame is what's causing people stress more than the content, I really need to rethink. Joan Bowler is a mathematician who's done a lot of work, again, in Stanford, and she has seen through experiments on the brain that when students make mistakes, the brain lights up, and it appears that neural pathways are formed. So challenges to the brain result in growth. This is really an important point that we can talk about with our learners. Understanding mind-brain education is a great entree into rigor. And Jason Moser did additional research, and he found that not only do our brains grow, but when we make a mistake, the synapses fire whether we pay attention to the mistake or not. So I just think that's really fascinating. And it just makes me excuse all my mistakes. So how do we get here? Do you have any idea how we got to the need for rigor? Anybody know, if you write in the chat pod, what brought us to this place of knowing we need more rigorous instruction in adult education? I see that Jerry is typing. That's exactly right, Jerry. That's what a lot of research has shown. There's more. And Grace and Angela are letting us know what they think. Uh, Dropouts, absolutely. The changing world of work, underperformance in the classroom, Brenda, I think, um, and that would be interesting to explore more when we see each other. But the ACT study in 2006 found that 12th graders were 4 years behind where they needed to be able to read at a freshman college level. And definitely, Jerry, that is what employers are saying. And certainly the standards in education have brought us to this point. So it's sort of a chicken egg situation, right? We have a 21st century that requires that we embrace rigorous instruction. And that 21st century embrace has brought about the academic standards. And now academic standards in turn hold us accountable. So I think as we go through this, you already have a lot of this information. So what I'd ask you to do is, as I go through this little second part of the mini lecture, I want you to think, what do you already know? So as I say, you can say to yourself, well, I know that. And then if there's anything that's new or interesting, just make note of it, because it is something that I would like you to be able to bring back with you or bring with you to to our meeting on the 16th. Exactly, Margot. So one of the first shifts that has brought us where we need to be is that we need to shift towards the integration of content areas. We have been living in silos, which I'm sure you're aware of. And now we know that in order for our adult learners to make the kind of progress in the time frame that they need to make that progress, we need to be more integrated in our approaches. We also need to be able to integrate transition skills at all levels. And you were mentioning some transition skills when you were talking about the skills that are needed, certainly the soft skills. And for those of you that are working with very low level English language learners, soft skills is language that they can begin to learn within the first week of classes. So there's no reason for us not to begin this integration at the earliest possible point in the learner's I've lost the word, in the learner's I can't think of it, as the learner progresses. Journey. Thank you, Milana. Thank you. Repertoire. Lovely. World. Perfect. Another shift, as I mentioned, I think a little while ago, is that intentional instruction needs to be provided so that learners can demonstrate their higher order thinking and problem solving skills. We can't assume that because we model it or we provide texts that show it, that learners have the language to demonstrate it. So we want them to climb high and we want to give them the tools to do that. We also want to dive deep. We want to focus on depth of knowledge, not rote memory, move beyond formulas and facts. Whatever they need to support them in diving deeply, we'll do that. But we want to get them we want to move them more closely, we want to move them more deeply into the content, because that's what the 21st century allows. The 21st century gives us easy access to facts, to formulas, to processes. We can find those. But how do we then turn that into real learning, deeper learning? And that comes in part through close reading of texts. Another shift that's occurred is that we are moving from this concept that first you get your English language proficiency and then we'll give you content. Now we're seeing it as a more parallel relationship and the blending. And we see this in the integrated education and training programs. We see this in iBest. We see this in a lot of concurrent and contextualized programs. And I think those of you that are CCRS familiar will recognize these shifts. So prioritizing content-rich informational text, emphasizing academic language, focusing on textual evidence. And those all come from this lovely blue document, signaling an upward shift in the knowledge, skills, and abilities that students need to develop, increasing the language demands across the content areas, and identifying specific language and analytical practices that students need to perform. So the CCRS really set the pattern for us. It told us, what we need to do, not the how, but the what we need to do to get learners to where they need to be. And the shifts extend now into the English language proficiency standards, supporting language learners so that they can reach these standards. One does not supplant the other. One is a lift up into the other, as Mary said. So in a nutshell, our focus, the way that we're launching this process of exploring rigor, is a consciousness that rigor incorporates struggle and success, that there are instructional shifts and 21st century shifts that we can point to make this difficult process relevant, as Cece said, and that we can check ourselves as we're moving forward to make sure that we are providing the skills that learners are going to need in order to make the struggle move towards success outside of our classroom. Would you please take 2 minutes to think about something that you heard over the last 10 minutes and write down what you will take away from that. If there's something that you'll take away, it could be a single word, it could be a phrase, but something that stuck with you. And what I'm doing right now, by the way, is I'm not commenting because that's one way of encouraging a growth mindset. When the teacher comments, then people focus on what the teacher's saying. So I'm going to be quiet again. I think it looks like everyone has written something, unless I'm wrong. Oh, Brenda. I don't remember saying that, Brenda, but I like that you came up with it. It actually bodes well for the webinar. Keep typing. I'm going to, the chat will remain. I'm going to take us to a new layout because this is an opportunity for you to talk about what you already do. Got it. I understand. So how about another 30 seconds and then I will set us off on our new task. Oh, Nick, beautifully stated. Oops, sorry. Okay, lovely work. And I'm going to make sure that you all get a copy of this because we can send this out by email so you can see what you've written. So I see that Jerry's already jumped in. This is a mixer. What you do is you start at any one of these 4 pods and you start writing about your response to the question. And these are rigor elements. So the topic can be rigorous, the questions can be rigorous, the text can be rigorous, the tasks can be rigorous. So paying attention to the topic, what's one topic in your curriculum that always challenges your learners? In terms of the questions, What question do you ask that really gets the learners thinking? That you say, "Ah, I love this question because it always gets something going on." And then a technique that you use to help learners navigate complex text. And last but not least, something that gives learners an aha, a task that gives them an aha. So we're going to do this for 2 minutes. See if you could get into as many pods as possible. And we'll play some music. So if you find the music to be too loud, you just turn down the volume at the lower part of your screen. Sorry if I was classy, I could fade it out. Penny Pearson could do that. I see that we have a couple of people still typing in the questions section, but that was about 2 minutes, actually a little bit more. Let's take a moment. You can continue to type if you like, but let's take a moment and look over the topics. Looks like there was no issue with picking out which topics are challenging. And what would be good is to think about why, of course, right? Because that will help us develop the scaffolds. Um, and I think Cece's point that, even for students who have an intention of becoming citizens, citizenship is challenging, but it looks like they also love it as well. So I think sometimes challenging can also mean high interest. And that would be interesting to know if the Keirsey temperament assessment or the rounding and estimating in math has the same correlation. I look forward to discussing that with you when we talk together. In terms of the questions, you had so many wonderful questions. Just the idea of giving students the opportunity to relate the information to themselves, how can you apply it? We talk about the fact that text-dependent questions are really important because they make the text the expert, but there is a time for the learner to think in terms of the application to his or her life so that the text becomes quite meaningful once we're sure they really understand the text. Another thing to be aware of is inference. I didn't see a lot of inference questions, but those can be really quite engaging. Imagine if questions, because again, they're starting from the content, but they're moving out and creating imagination, opportunities to imagine. Oh, I like Brenda, I like yours. That's terrific. And then if they say they haven't asked all the questions, You say too bad. Just teasing. Then with text complexity, I noticed that a couple of you said strategies, but then we got some actual strategies, which is good. So crossing out answers so that you're eliminating the parts of the text, you're creating a narrower scope. Think alouds are wonderful techniques. So this is an example. This mixer provides us with an example of all the things we're already doing in the classroom that are rigorous. So I think that really makes it very parallel in terms of looking at our adult learners and the things that they already do in their lives that are very rigorous. So it's not a leap in the same way that we might imagine it would be. We're already doing a lot of great things, and it's a matter of perhaps refining it, finding out a little more about how we can adjust something that maybe we thought was too difficult, but with a scaffold could be manageable. Or maybe we need to look at other content areas that we haven't been addressing. And I can see from the tasks that you have a lot of quality tasks going on. And some of these are tasks that we'll actually be using in our workshop. So speaking of the workshop, for those of you that are not familiar with the English Language Proficiency Standards or the CCRS, you can see that in this on this layout at the bottom, you have a little pod that gives you the opportunity to click on those handouts and they'll download to your computer. And they give you the essential elements of what you need to read in the document. I've only provided, I think, view 1 on the extract of the ALPS. But this way you'll have them if you don't have access to them. They're PDFs online. They're easy to look up. But before you come to our workshop on the 16th, it would be great for you to have some familiarity with both those documents. Today we've started by laying the groundwork, and we're going to our face-to-face session on October 16th. And then I think one of the wonderful aspects of this training is it doesn't stop there. From the 16th through to spring, hopefully you are applying the concepts that you've worked on together and collaborated on in the workshop, and then working in your own context on these. I would hope that you'd be able to stay in touch. We'll work on ways to do that. But then in the spring, you and your colleagues who have taken this throughout the state will come together on a webinar and discuss the pluses, the challenges, what's interesting, and you'll get an opportunity to learn from a lot of different colleagues as well as those you worked with on the 16th. And Mary Louise, did you want to say anything before I ask for questions?
Go ahead, and you can ask for questions now.
Okay. All right. So this is our agenda, and if you have any questions about what we've just talked about or what you see here on the agenda, is there anything that you'd like to know about that's going to be coming your way? Are there questions that you want answered when you come on the 16th? I see that Grace is typing. A few people are typing. I think you can see from the agenda that we have a number of ways. Yes, we are going to be looking at strategies. Absolutely. So Jerry, could you give me a little clarification when you say effective implementation of CASAS along with the curriculum? Are you looking for us to make correlations as a group to the CASAS content standards? Oh, Lynn, we were going to put together a spacecraft. Why did you ruin it? Not at all. We will, however, be doing one small project for man. We're looking at project-based learning specifically because of its ability to integrate pretty much what Jerry's talking about, some of the elements that we've been talking about from the workplace standpoint, the collaboration, and also learner agency, which is something we're going to touch on. Okay, so the showing growth over time, Jerry, is that through uh, performance-based assessments, or are you looking at the CASAS as the assessment that would show the growth? Yes, Margot, it's a lot. It's almost entirely hands-on learning. One of the problems that I find with a webinar is by its nature, unless we're on a Zoom or something where we can all be engaged in a video conversation, it's very challenging to do anything but lecture. So I do try to do it as interactively as possible, but in terms of our face-to-face, there's minimal lecture time and mostly hands-on. No, I understand that CASAS is pre and post test, Jerry. I guess my question to you was, were you looking for us to relate the growth to the CASAS pre and post test and how Rigor would do that? Okay, great. I will make sure that we respond to that. And Brenda, that's a wonderful point because really it's all about the students. That's where everything, the rubber hits the road. It's if we are not serving the learners, then the professional development is some lovely time that we spent together. Great. So we will definitely be talking about the assessment, and measuring the rigor is going to be something you'll be able to do relatively easily. Oh, that's very funny, Brenda. Measuring the rigor will be done through some very specific graphic organizers. You know, did the task do X? Did the question have Y? So it'll be the type of thing where you'll be able to check it relatively easily. But it is, by and large, by virtue of the type of learning it is, because it's very active, it's very, student engagement is high in a rigorous lesson or rigorous instruction. Very often it's performance-based assessment. Of course, you can do multiple choice tests and you can test a learner's ability to recall. But in terms of the inference, the critical thinking, all of that is going to come through the academic discourse that you observe, the writing that you observe. Okay, I will put that requirement in there, Marianne. I'm sure we'll have strong coffee. I, for one, will have strong coffee, but I'll share. I'm just a giver. So this is what you will need to look at before the 16th. If you're unfamiliar with the CCRS, please view the webinar. Oh, you know what? That doesn't seem to be in the share pod. So that will go out in an email to you. I think it may have already gone out, but we'll make sure you get that link. Read the introductions to the ELPS or CCRS documents, and then let me just see what Margot wrote. Will ESL teachers be able to work with ESL teachers? Yes, absolutely. Great question, Margot. Yes, there are some tasks that really are about adult learners, and it's terrific to do some mixed learning. But right now, I already have you grouped by your context. A few of you have indicated that you have multiple contexts, so you'll have a choice of where you'd like to work, and you can move around. But ESL does work with CCRS, but it works at it through ELPS. Just a little side note. So here's what I'd like you to bring. I would request that you bring is please bring something that you're planning on teaching in this month or November, so that you walk out with something that you have adjusted or refined based on the work that we're going to be doing together. Bring a laptop, tablet, or smartphone. Any of the three will do. But we are going to be doing some digital activities, and it would be terrific for you to have that material. If you don't have, and I've run into this before, if you don't have a device, We'll be working in teams, so you'll be able to work with someone else, but it would be great for you to be able to have access to some of this, to some of the material that we're going to be using online. And then my last request, my last bullet is please bring an open and inquiring mind. I can tell already that this is exactly the profile of our group, but sometimes, the next new thing can create a little bit of a pushback. So keep an open mind because through struggle comes success. Sure, Milana, that would be great. Bring something you've used before, or if you want, you could ask a teacher if there's a lesson that he or she would like you to work with, so that you could mentor them on the lesson. So they could, at least what I'm thinking is for that lesson to get taught between October and the spring, it might be useful to have someone who will teach it. And then you could be in the classroom and support them. Okay. Thank you so much. And I'll see you at the face-to-face, CC. Thank you so much. And I believe we're ready to close.
Yes, thank you very much, Jamie. This is Mary Louise again. After today's engaging session, I'd like to call it an increasing rigor appetizer. We're looking forward to Monday, October 16th. Here is a reminder of the address for the session, and lunch will be provided for you. So AEBG has an evaluation, and they will be sending that to you in the email, so look for that web link so you can complete your evaluation survey. And thank you for spending time with us this afternoon, and thank you, Jamie, for all of your knowledge and sharing that with everyone in such an upbeat way, as always. Thank you.
Yes, I'm sorry about the vocabulary gaps, but thank you for filling them in.
Effort. Thank you, everyone. We look forward to seeing you in person. Bye-bye.
Thank you, Milana. I hope I'm saying your name right, but you'll let me know if I'm not.